Hi, I'm Delara. On my birthday, I brought a homemade cake to my parents' house, only to watch them hand my sister the keys to a brand new home. They didn't even say happy birthday. Not one gift. Not one glance. But here's what they didn't know. The lottery ticket I slipped into their gift bag, the one they never opened, wasn't just worth money. It exposed everything. So before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening? And where from? I'd love to know, because this story, it starts with silence and ends with something they could never buy. I woke up to the familiar creak of my ceiling fan and the pale light slipping through the cheap blinds I still hadn't replaced. No singing, no knock at the door, no birthday text from Mom. Just the hum of the refrigerator and a soft ache I tried to ignore. I turned over and reached for my phone, half expecting a message, anything. But the lock screen just showed the date. My birthday, a Tuesday. And not a single notification from the people who were supposed to remember me. Growing up, birthdays were always a shared event. Me and Seraphine 2 years apart, but always treated like one person when it came to cake and candles. But once she hit her influencer stride, the shared part disappeared. Just like the attention. I rolled out of bed and shuffled into the kitchen, letting the silence settle around me like old dust. The smell of vanilla bean and lemon zest still lingered from last night. The cake sat finished on the counter. My own recipe, light citrusy layered with patience and sugar. I'd made it for them. I told myself it didn't matter whether they remembered, but part of me still hoped. After a quiet breakfast and a quick shower, I boxed the cake, carefully folding the corners of the wax paper, as if it were something sacred. I didn't bother dressing up, just jeans and a soft blue blouse, the kind of outfit no one notices. I drove the 15 minutes to my parents' house with the cake seat-belted beside me like a fragile passenger. Their driveway was full. I hesitated. Mom hadn't mentioned guests. For a moment, I allowed myself to think maybe a surprise for me. But as I stepped closer, I heard the laughter. Bright, rehearsed Seraphine's voice. You didn't have to do all this. Oh my God, is that champagne? I walked through the open front door and froze. The living room was decked out with gold and white streamers, helium balloons brushing the ceiling, and an enormous canvas sign, Welcome Home, Seraphine. She stood in the middle of it all, radiant as ever, phone in hand, posing with the perfect, just surprised expression. A small crowd had gathered. Relatives, neighbors, her brand manager. My mother stood beside her, clutching a glass of wine. Dad was beaming. I cleared my throat. No one noticed. I moved toward the kitchen cake still in hand and set it gently on the corner of the buffet table next to a tower of store-bought cupcakes branded with Seraphine's initials in edible glitter. Oh, Delara, sweetie. Mom finally noticed me. She walked over, barely touching my shoulder. Could you help with the photo? We're doing a group shot. I opened my mouth to speak. She cut me off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Now's not the time for drama. I swallowed hard, picked up the camera someone had left on the counter, and took the photo. From behind the lens, I watched Dad pull something from his pocket. A shiny brass key. This, he declared, is for you, sweetheart. A new place? 3 bedrooms, all yours. The room erupted in cheers. I kept taking pictures, my hands mechanical. My cake sat untouched in the corner, fading into the background like I always had. Someone called for a toast. I turned away, breathing through my nose, and found a spot near the table to disappear into. A kid, one of Seraphine's friend's children, rushed past me and clipped the corner of the buffet. The cake box teetered, then fell. The sound it made soft, wet final. I knelt instinctively, hands shaking as I gathered the pieces. The frosting smeared across the tile like spilled effort. One layer cracked clean down the center. Mom looked overside. That's why we buy from professionals, honey. No one offered to help. No one even moved. I stood slowly clutching the box like something dead. The crowd had moved on. More photos, more praise. My cake and me along with it forgotten. Back at my apartment, I slid off my shoes at the door. The apartment was still warm from the morning's baking. I opened the freezer, shifted a bag of peas, and made space. I placed the broken cake inside like it deserved saving. Same recipe, less sugar next time. I stared at the closed freezer door for a moment longer, then walked to my small kitchen table. I pulled out the envelope I'd tucked in my purse that morning, a lottery ticket I hadn't had the heart to gift them. I left my own birthday carrying a cake no one wanted, but they had no idea what else I had carried out that day. I didn't cry when I got home. I didn't scream or throw anything or pace around my small apartment above the laundromat like I used to in my 20s when everything felt like the end of the world. I just took off my shoes, set the box with the ruined cake on the counter, and stood there listening to the distant hum of dryers spinning below. It was almost 7, and the spring rain had started. Not a storm, just a soft, steady drizzle tapping against the windows like an old lullaby. The kind that made you feel lonelier than thunder ever could. My dinner sat untouched on the stove reheated lasagna. I wasn't hungry. My body was still full of that hollow kind of ache, like I'd swallowed silence all day, and now it was expanding in my chest. The kitchen table was cluttered with leftovers I'd brought back from the party, some half-eaten cookies, a few scones, and 2 envelopes cards I'd slipped into Mom and Dad's gift bags earlier that morning. I hadn't even signed them, just simple scratch-off tickets. Nothing fancy, just a little joke. A small wish tucked into glittery cardstock. They hadn't even opened them. I sat down. My fingers ran along the edge of one envelope. The other sat beside it, still perfectly sealed, like it had never even been touched. I picked up the last ticket, the one I'd kept in my purse as a backup. I hadn't meant to scratch it today. It was supposed to be the just-in-case card in case theirs were all duds, in case someone laughed and said, "Ah, nice try." I'd planned to say here one more. Maybe this one's the winner. Funny, isn't it? I had planned to give them my last chance at a miracle. Now here it was in my hand, curled a little from the warmth of my bag. I grabbed a quarter from the drawer and started scratching it. Not really thinking, just going through the motions while a rerun of a cooking show mumbled on the TV. 3 matching numbers. I paused, leaned closer. 3 matching numbers again. I stared. $120,000. My hand didn't shake right away. It took a second for my brain to catch up, for a breath to hitch, for my heart to say, "Wait, did that just happen?" I blinked, checked again, Googled the code on the back. Twice. It was real. I sat there silent with that ticket resting in my palm, like something radioactive. I could feel the heat of it. Or maybe that was just the blood rushing to my face. For a long moment, I didn't feel joy. Not even relief. Just a strange kind of silence, like the world had paused to ask me a single question. Now what my first thought wasn't noble. It wasn't, "Oh, I should still give it to them." It was a flicker of instinct. Pull away. Protect. But then my conscience, the one shaped by decades of family dinners and Sunday sermons, whispered, "You always said you'd give it to them if it hit. That it would be a gift to the whole family. But families don't leave their daughters standing alone on their birthday, do they? They don't hand the golden child a house and ask the other to take the picture. They don't throw away the cake you spent all night making and sigh like you were a burden to begin with. They don't ask you to stay silent and then forget you ever spoke at all." My eyes drifted back to the trash can under the sink. I could still hear Mom's voice in my head. "That's why we buy from professionals." I looked down at the ticket again. "A gift only matters," I said aloud, "when someone believes you're worth receiving it." I folded the ticket, carefully slipped it into a clean envelope, and tucked it into my top drawer next to my passport-expired coupons and that photo of me and Seraphine as kids on a tire swing. Then I grabbed the 2 unopened envelopes off the table, walked to the trash, and dropped them in. There wasn't even a sound when they landed. Just the soft rustle of paper hitting paper. Some things really are that quiet when they end. I grabbed a sticky note from the fridge and wrote, "If no one remembers your birthday, maybe it's time to start living like it's a new year." I stuck it on the cabinet above the sink and stared at it. Not exactly profound, but it was the most honest thing I'd said out loud in weeks. After cleaning up the table, I made tea. I didn't really want opened my laptop and typed into the search bar. Affordable apartments outside Charlotte. The listings loaded slowly, my Wi-Fi still acting up. Then I opened another tab. Culinary programs for adults. Maybe Asheville, I muttered. Or Durham. Somewhere with air that doesn't smell like detergent and regret. I paused, thought about telling them. But I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't open the family group chat that Seraphine dominated with her links and her filtered photos and her quotes about living intentionally. I didn't draft a text to Mom. Because the truth was, they wouldn't notice if I left. And maybe that's why I had to. That night, I made 2 decisions. I would keep the ticket, and I would leave without telling anyone. I didn't sleep much after that night. Some people stay up planning revenge. I stayed up researching apartment leases and culinary certifications. Within 10 days, I'd packed what little I owned, gave notice at the bakery, and signed a lease for a tiny studio in Asheville. 1 room, slanted ceilings, and a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. But it had one thing my childhood home didn't: silence that didn't hurt. The only noise was the occasional upstairs neighbor dragging furniture at impossible hours or the early morning buses down the hill. I didn't mind either. They reminded me I was someplace new, someplace mine. 2 weeks had passed since the birthday that wasn't. I hadn't replied to Mom's single text. "Heard you left town? Hope you're not being dramatic again." Dad didn't text at all, but I saw his missed call and ignored the voicemail. I could imagine what it said. Something like, "You should have stayed. Your sister was really counting on you to help organize the thank you notes." It was Saturday. I was up early for my culinary class project sourcing local produce from the farmer's market. The rain had cleared, replaced by a warm, misty morning. I wore my apron over jeans, pulled my curls back, and tucked a small notebook under my arm. I didn't expect to see anyone I knew. That was the point of being here. I was scanning a stand of heirloom carrots when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Well, if it isn't Eileen's little baker. I turned slowly. Aunt Sylvia? She looked the same. Flowy scarf, sunglasses on her head, silver gray hair twisted up into a lazy bun. She held a basket filled with herbs and strawberries. Delara. She blinked, surprised. "What are you doing here?" I fumbled for a smile. "Hey, small world. I didn't know you'd moved to Asheville. I just needed a change of pace." I didn't know how much she knew. Best to keep it vague. She stepped closer. "You working around here? I'm in a culinary program." "Long overdue. That's wonderful." She smiled softly. "Your grandmother would have loved that." We ended up sitting at one of the shaded picnic tables near the coffee cart. I bought her a black tea, myself a chamomile. It was too warm for hot drinks, but I wasn't thinking straight. She looked at me for a long moment. "Your mom didn't mention you moved, though I suppose things have been a bit tense. That was one way to describe it." I shrugged. "They've got their hands full with Seraphine's brand expansion or whatever she's calling it now?" Sylvia sipped her tea. "I figured you might have been upset about the inheritance." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what inheritance?" She paused. "From your grandmother, Eileen." My body went still. "I was told you didn't want anything. That you'd said no, wanted Seraphine to handle things." I couldn't breathe. "Who told you that?" She looked surprised by my reaction. "Your mother. She said you felt it was better if Seraphine carried the family legacy." I set my cup down. "I never said that." A long silence settled between us. Then she sighed. She got the house, the garden, the little trust fund Eileen had set aside. I assumed. Well, I stood up. I need to go, I said. Delara. But I was already walking away. Back in my apartment, I didn't sit down. I went straight to my email, opened the folder I hadn't touched in years. Old family docs. There it was. A scanned PDF of my grandmother's will dated 4 years ago. I read the line 3 times. The estate shall be divided equally between my granddaughters Seraphine and Delara. Not a footnote, not a maybe. Clear as day. I dropped into my chair, my hands trembling against the edge of the desk. Then I remembered something. Grandma's old friend, Warren Blake. He was a lawyer. A quiet man with kind eyes and a habit of quoting scripture even when no one asked. He handled her affairs at least until she fell ill. I'd sent him a holiday card 2 years ago. His number was still in my contacts. I called. He answered after the second ring. Blake residence. Mr. Blake, it's Delara. Delara Marin. Delara. He sounded warm, but slightly confused. Well, it's been a while. Do you have a minute? It's about my grandmother's estate. A pause. Of course. I told him what Sylvia said. About the inheritance. About Seraphine. There was another pause. Longer this time. I remember Seraphine and your mother came in about a month before Eileen passed. They said you'd agreed to transfer your portion, so we finalized the updated paperwork. I never signed anything, I said, my voice thin. He was quiet again. I assumed you had. I never saw the original copy after that day. Just the version they brought in. I retired shortly after. My stomach turned. Delara. He began cautious. Do you still have your original? I do. I'd suggest you get someone to look at both, compare signatures, dates, and make sure nothing was filed without proper verification. I ended the call staring at my phone for a long time. They didn't just forget my birthday. They erased me from a legacy I was part of. After that phone call with Mr. Blake, something in me stopped trying to rationalize. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the ceiling of my studio apartment, listening to the hum of the fridge and the gentle patter of late spring rain on the window. The quiet felt different now, heavier, like it was trying to tell me something I hadn't dared admit. This wasn't an accident. This was a pattern. 5 weeks had passed since my birthday, and I was still peeling back layers of what I hadn't seen before. The bakery classes kept my hands busy, and my evenings at the cafe gave me just enough structure not to fall apart. But even flour and fire couldn't burn out the ache of being rewritten right out of my own history. The message came in around 3 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday, while I was prepping lemon glaze at my counter. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom's number. I wiped my fingers on a towel before picking it up. Don't worry about Delara. She'll get over it like always. Focus on the press release for your brand launch. I stared at the screen for a long time. No punctuation, no hesitation. Just a clean, casual sentence meant for Seraphine. Sent to me, like always. That was the part that caught in my chest. Not she'll get over it. I'd been hearing that all my life. But the way she said it, like it was a trait of mine. Like forgiveness was a flaw she counted on. I didn't respond. I just slid the phone face down on the counter and continued stirring the glaze, though I couldn't taste anything through the knot that formed at the back of my throat. Later that day at school, the burn happened. I'd never scorched a sauce in my life. It was a bechamel, simple enough. Butterflower milk. But I let it sit half a second too long while zoning out, and just like that, it turned bitter. Marco, my instructor, noticed immediately. He walked over and lowered the heat, then gently nudged me toward the side prep area. Delara, he said quietly. What's going on? I opened my mouth to make an excuse. Long day, bad sleep, maybe a headache. But what came out instead was something I hadn't said aloud before. My whole life I thought being good would be enough, I murmured. Turns out I was supposed to be convenient too. Marco didn't speak right away. He just nodded, his eyes kind and steady. You don't owe anyone your silence? I gave a small, hollow laugh. That's the part they liked most. By evening, the drizzle had turned into a steady downpour. I was home, hair still damp from the walk back, sipping lukewarm tea, when I made the mistake of opening social media. Seraphine's page was glowing. Legacy dinner for Grandma Eileen's vision, read the caption on one carousel of photos. There was my mother raising a glass. My father beaming next to Seraphine in a green velvet dress that I'd helped her pick out 2 years ago for an entirely different occasion. The caption continued, celebrating the next chapter in our family's story. Not a single photo included me. No mention. Not even a blurry one from the background. They were rewriting everything. Not just the will, not just my role, but the entire narrative. It wasn't grief I felt this time. It wasn't even anger. It was something colder, something bone deep. The realization that they didn't just forget me, they preferred it that way. Around 8:00 p.m., my phone rang. Aunt Sylvia. I hesitated, then picked up. Hi, I said. There was a pause. Then her voice came through low and cautious. Dilara, I just wanted to check on you. I'm fine, I lied. I saw some of the pictures. I didn't know they were planning anything. Your mother didn't expect you to find out. She usually doesn't, I said, trying to keep my tone steady. There was a beat of silence, then Sylvia said something I didn't expect. You know, once Evelyn told me she regretted how she handled things with you. But it was always after the fact. Always when you weren't around to hear it. I closed my eyes. Of course she did, I whispered. Regret is safe when no one's listening. Dilara. She's always counted on me not to push back, I said, more to myself than to her. I thanked Sylvia and hung up soon after. The apartment was quiet again, but now I didn't mind it. I pulled out a spiral-bound notebook from under the bed, one I'd used for class notes, but had slowly started to repurpose. I began writing. Email from Grandma's lawyer confirming discrepancy. Text from Mom. Don't worry about Dilara. Social posts. Seraphine called it Grandma's legacy, no mention of me. On a fresh page, I wrote one sentence all by itself. They expect me to disappear quietly, but this time, silence is strategy. No grand speeches, no big confrontations. Just documentation, proof, and intention. I wasn't going to shout, but I was going to be heard. The first thing I did after writing that sentence, they expect me to disappear quietly, but this time, silence is strategy, was open the fridge. Not because I was hungry. I just needed something to do with my hands. Something simple. Something grounding. My fingers brushed over a container of thyme I'd bought at the farmer's market the weekend before. Grandma used to say, add thyme when you're building layers. It doesn't shout, but it lingers. That was her way. Never flashy, never loud, but always unforgettable when you paid attention. The next morning, at culinary school, Marco assigned us a family recipe challenge. Reinvent something from home. Not just replicate, reinterpret. I didn't have to think long. Grandma Eileen's roast. She used to make it every second Sunday, the scent of garlic and molasses wafting through the halls, long before the first slice ever hit the plate. I remembered the way she used to tilt her head as she stirred, humming something off-key while I peeled carrots. But this time, I didn't want to copy it. I wanted to tell the truth of it. I swapped the sweetness out, added cumin and a dash of smoked paprika, pushed the sear deeper, darker. Instead of honey glaze, I let the natural juices speak. Let the silence hang in the pan a second longer before deglazing. By the time Marco took his first bite, the room had gone still. He set down his fork and looked at me. Not like a teacher, but like someone seeing something click into place. This isn't nostalgia, he said quietly. It's something else. I nodded. It's who I could have been if I wasn't always playing it safe. That's when he told me about the event. An industry tasting invite only where chefs present one dish to a panel of potential investors, restaurateurs, and legacy mentors. A place where names are made quietly over the course of a single evening. You should enter, he said. Present this. I blinked. You think I'm ready? He smiled. Delara, this isn't about readiness. It's about being seen. My throat tightened. I looked down at the dish again. He added almost offhand. You'll need to register under your real name. They need to know who's presenting. My first instinct was to say no. I could almost hear Mom's voice in my head. She's not the type who wants the spotlight. And then Seraphine's favorite dig. She's too sensitive for pressure. I shook my head slowly. If they find out I'm coming, they'll make sure I don't. Marco didn't push. Just said, then let them try. That night, back at my apartment, I pulled out Grandma's old recipe box. The one I'd kept hidden since the day they handed Seraphine the house keys and shoved my cake into the trash. Inside, behind a faded index card with roast notes scribbled in the margins, I found it. A small folded scrap. Her handwriting, unmistakable. To the quiet one day your silence will say more than their noise ever could. My breath caught. I reread it 5 times. She had seen me, even when no one else had. I turned on my laptop and pulled up the registration page. Name, Delara Eileen Marin. I didn't flinch when I typed it. When the confirmation email came through, I stared at it for a minute before sending a single message to Aunt Sylvia. I'm presenting Grandma's roast next Friday. Don't tell them. But you're welcome. No emoji. No exclamation point. Just the truth. The next day, I started sketching plating ideas in my prep notebook. Not because I needed them for class, but because this time I wanted to offer more than a meal. I wanted to offer clarity. On the 3rd page, I circled an ingredient Grandma always listed, but that my mother never used. Not once. Cloves. She said it was too old-fashioned, said it overpowered things. But I remembered the way Grandma had looked at me once when I was 12 and tried the roast with it for the first time. You taste the difference, she'd asked. I nodded. That's what makes it bold, she'd said. That's what makes it yours. I whispered aloud now. This time they'll taste what they never dared to serve. I wasn't doing it for them, but I wasn't hiding from them either. And I didn't care who else found out. I should have known something was wrong the minute I stepped into the kitchen that morning. Marco was already on edge, his jaw tight, sleeves rolled halfway as if bracing for impact. He didn't greet me like usual. No nod, no quick morning. Instead, he pointed to the clipboard in the inspector's hands and whispered under his breath, "Brace yourself." The man in the white coat was polite but firm. We received an anonymous tip about improper labeling and potential cross-contamination from this section. He gestured to my prep area with the flat of his pen. I blinked. What, that's? No. Everything was double-checked yesterday. I went over it all before I left. The inspector didn't look convinced. He motioned to one of the assistants who started pulling ingredients off the shelf. The sauce base I'd made from scratch 2 nights ago. Gone. My spice mixes bagged and tagged. Even the rosemary oil I'd infused myself had a yellow sticker slapped on it. Without proper documentation, we can't allow these to be used in a public tasting, the inspector said. Marco stayed calm, too calm. But I saw his jaw clench. This didn't come from nowhere, he muttered once the inspector left. Someone wants you off the board. He didn't need to say who. The moment he said someone, my stomach tightened. I could picture her. Seraphine. Manicured fingers tapping out a message on her phone, probably in the middle of a facial. I didn't cry. Not then. But later that night, when I returned to the storage cooler to grab the backup sauce just in case I found the shelf empty, everything was gone. Not just my ingredients, but even the backup herbs I'd set aside with my name clearly labeled. Panic rose in my throat. I started opening every container, digging through bins. Nothing. That's when I got the notification. Seraphine had posted a new reel, a close-up of a roast dish, framed just right with a drizzle pattern I recognized too well. My plating, my garnish. My God. The same garnish I'd scribbled in my notebook 2 nights ago. Her caption read, "Inspired by legacy, reimagined for modern tables." I stared at the screen like it might shatter. Everything, every step, every intention. I'd laid it all out with care, and now it was public, under her name. I stormed back into the prep room and slammed my notebook onto Marco's desk. "It's all been taken," I said, my voice hoarse. "The roast, the idea, even the ingredients. It's all hers now." Marco looked up slowly. His eyes didn't pity me. They pierced right through the fury. "So now," he said evenly, "do you cook like someone afraid of losing? Or do you cook like someone with nothing left to protect?" His words hit harder than anything that had happened all week. I walked back into the kitchen, my hands trembling, but not from fear this time. I began pulling out what was left. A few root vegetables, 1 bunch of wilting parsley, cracked black pepper in a paper tin, and tucked at the back of the top shelf, a jar of clove powder I had brought from home. The same one my mother always refused to use, called too harsh for company. I opened the lid and inhaled. Sharp, raw, familiar. I rolled my sleeves and started chopping. I adjusted the roast recipe one more time. Not to salvage what had been stolen, but to build something that couldn't be duplicated. Something she'd never dare try to imitate because it came from a place she didn't even know existed. I thought of Grandma again. Her table, her stubborn hands, her quiet fire. And I thought of all the times I'd shrunk myself to fit into a family that praised silence, but punished individuality. This version of the dish didn't ask permission. At 2 a.m., I plated it. Not perfect, but mine. I took a picture, not for posting, just for proof. A message popped up. "Tessa." I saw the post she wrote. "Want me there? Just say it." I hesitated for only a second before replying. "Come early. Bring your camera. We're going to document everything they try to steal. Because the only way to protect a story is to serve it before they can rewrite it." Tessa and I stood just inside the loading doors, a soft drizzle misting the concrete outside as the catering team rolled past with carts of linens and glassware. She adjusted the strap on her camera bag while I checked my crate of final ingredients for the 3rd time. "Ready?" She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I thought. But I nodded. The tasting showcase was being held inside an old brick building downtown, remodeled just enough to feel modern, but with steel beams and exposed piping to remind everyone they were here for something authentic. 8 tables stretched across the room, each one under its own spotlight. Marco's connections had gotten me booth number 6, and as we walked toward it, I realized who was stationed right beside me. Seraphine, of course. She was in full bloom, flanked by 2 assistants chatting up a local news anchor, while her boyfriend held a mirror for last-minute lipstick checks. She wore one of Grandma's old brooches turned sideways, like it was her own logo now. She caught my eye and smiled. Polite, empty, calculated. I said nothing and began unloading my crate. Tessa sat up discreetly, blending in like press filming quietly from over my shoulder. I had barely started arranging my tools when a young chef with a man bun and clipboard walked past. "Hey," he said casually, nodding toward my table. "Aren't you the one who copied your sister's roast concept, kind of gutsy showing up here?" I froze. "Excuse me," but he had already moved on, heading toward the judge's table. Tessa stopped filming. "What the hell was that?" Before I could answer, I caught a snippet of conversation from behind Seraphine's booth. Investors are leaning toward the Brock brand. No one wants to back a wild card. It's about consistency, not kitchen drama. Wild card. My name had become a whisper. A liability. I turned back to my booth and stared at the handouts I had printed pages explaining my process, the ingredient story, and even a tribute to Grandma Eileen. Something looked off. I picked one up. It wasn't mine. The pages were glossy, printed in a corporate serif font, and titled, Inspired by the Brock Family's Culinary Legacy. My name appeared once buried at the bottom of the last page, like a legal disclaimer. Tessa saw my hands tremble. They changed it, I said flatly. They rewrote it, she corrected. I didn't speak. I just reached for the chalkboard we had packed, the one Tessa had offered as a backup, in case I wanted something more personal. With one piece of white chalk and a deep, steady breath, I wrote the phrase I'd been repeating to myself all week. Some recipes are inherited, others are reclaimed. Tessa stepped back and filmed. Her hand wiped a tear off her cheek before she even realized it was there. The judges began to circulate. They weren't flashy. No entourage, no fanfare. Just notebooks, keen eyes, and seasoned palates. Then I saw him. James Rollins, one of the main investors Seraphine had tried to charm through Evelyn months ago. He stopped in front of my booth and looked at the plate. It was bold, raw edges. A burnt umber sauce with flecks of hand-ground clove and roasted citrus peels. No garnish for decoration. Only what mattered. He leaned in. Is this the original roast I've been hearing about? I met his gaze. No, I said. That one was taken. This one's mine. He nodded slowly, then reached for the spoon. I held my breath, but before it touched the plate, I heard the voice I'd been dreading. Well, isn't this a family affair? Seraphine said sweetly, stepping up beside him, holding her own silver-tasting spoon. She looked down at the dish, then at the chalkboard, her smile tight. Grandma would have loved the drama, she added. I didn't flinch, but I did look her dead in the eye and say, she loved the truth more. Seraphine held the spoon like she was about to perform. She dipped it into the roasted medallion, dragged it across the sauce, and brought it to her lips with practiced grace. Then she paused. For a second, her expression cracked. It was barely perceptible. A twitch at the corner of her mouth. A flicker in her eye. She swallowed, then straightened her back like she'd tasted vinegar instead of clove and citrus. It's bold, she managed, voice clipped. That's when Evelyn swept in. She was dressed for television, not taste. Heels too high for a kitchen, pearls strung tight around her neck like armor. Her eyes scanned the crowd and then landed on me, already narrowing before she spoke. You've made this a spectacle, she said loud enough for the investors nearby to hear. This is slander, Delara. You're turning our family into a public circus. I didn't blink. Seraphine chimed in, stepping just slightly behind our mother, like she always did when things got confrontational. You used a lottery ticket to buy your way into this event? She scoffed. That's not talent. That's luck dressed up as hustle. It wasn't her words that stung. It was how easily they came, like she'd rehearsed them in the mirror. I reached into my apron. From the inner pocket, I pulled out the small envelope. Cream-colored, unmarked, aged slightly at the corners, where I had handled it too often. I held it up. This is the ticket I gave you. I said, my voice calm but firm. The one you didn't bother to open. The one you threw away like every other thing I've tried to give this family. There was a ripple through the room. An audible hush, like someone had lowered the volume of everything but my voice. And yet I continued, turning toward the panel of investors and judges. This entire showcase, this moment, was built on what they threw away. I didn't get here by accident. I got here by salvaging what was left. Right then, Tessa stepped forward. She had her phone in hand, screen already lit. With a subtle nod to the tech crew handling the AV for the event, she tapped the play button and held it up to the overhead mic. From the speakers came Evelyn's voice recorded just days earlier, grainy, but clear enough. No one wants Delara's version of the story anyway. It's too sad, too messy. Seraphine's is cleaner, brighter, more promotable. The silence that followed was electric. Then came the sound of camera shutters. Journalists typing. Investors murmuring. A judge stepped forward and pointed to my booth. And yet this is the only original dish here tonight. The only one that hasn't been spoon-fed through a press kit. Another followed. We've heard enough PR. I'd rather back a chef who cooks from scars, not strategy. Evelyn opened her mouth to speak again. But no sound came. Seraphine backed away first. For once, she had no line to close the scene. A silver-haired man with a soft voice stepped up to my table, placing a business card gently beside my chalkboard sign. He looked me in the eye. "We're prepared to back your concept," he said. "But only if the story stays yours. Your voice. Your kitchen." I looked at the card, then back at him. And behind me, Tessa whispered, "They're leaving." I turned and saw them. My mother, my sister, walking away. Heels tapping on the showroom floor like punctuation marks to the last sentence they didn't get to write. They left that night without another word, and I didn't chase after them. I didn't have to. 6 months later, the soft rustle of napkins and low hum of clinking forks filled the space I once only dared to sketch on notebook paper. My restaurant wasn't big. Just 26 seats, pale wood floors, and soft copper lights that warmed the room without pretending too hard. The name painted on the front window read, Delara. No frills, no italics, just mine. I walked the floor slowly, checking in with each table. It was a soft launch, but every seat was taken. Tessa had helped spread the word without making it about revenge. She said, "Let the food talk first." I still wore the same apron I'd used in culinary school. The pocket near my waist had frayed a bit, but it still held the lottery ticket unscratched. Not because I was afraid of losing, but because I'd already won something better. Some things are worth more unsaid. Near the corner of the room, a four-top table sat quietly. Evelyn, Seraphine, Tessa, Aunt Sylvia. Tessa sat between the three of them, like a bridge trying to stay steady between two collapsing banks. They hadn't spoken much since the tasting panel. There had been calls, awkward apologies half-formed, and never quite landing. But tonight wasn't about making anything perfect. It was about letting the truth take up space. I brought the final course to their table myself. A reimagined version of the cake they'd once let fall to the floor like it meant nothing. This time, it was smaller, more refined. Vanilla bean sponge layered with bitter chocolate ganache and lemon zest cream. Same foundation, but deeper now. Grown up sharper. Evelyn stared at it. So did Seraphine. I set the plate down in front of them without ceremony. "Same recipe," I said quietly. "Less sugar." No one reached for their forks right away. Evelyn looked up. "So this is how you forgive us?" she asked, voice steady but distant. I thought for a moment, then replied with clarity I didn't know I had until the words came out. "No, this is how I feed people who are still learning what love tastes like. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't cruel. It just was." From across the room, the front door opened, and in walked Amelia, once my fiercest rival in culinary school, now softer around the edges. She looked nervous, holding a small folder. "I heard you're hiring prep cooks," she said, standing just shy of the hostess stand. I nodded. "If you bring your own recipes this time," I said gently. She exhaled, grateful, maybe even a little relieved. The night wound down. I returned to the kitchen where the air was warm with lemon peel and rosemary. Tessa stepped inside a frame tucked under her arm. "It came today," she said. She handed it to me. A photograph, black and white, of me mid-laugh, spoon in one hand, flames rising from a pan behind me. Beneath it, she had written, "Built from the scraps they left behind." I swallowed hard, and placed it near the door where guests could see it as they left. They thought the ticket would change everything. But it wasn't the money that rebuilt my life. It was the moment I realized I didn't need their permission to rise. The cake no one wanted had become the signature dessert on a menu they now lined up to taste.